Now, among the list of trainings that you have attended in your career, which we heard testimony from Major Grissom about, was, and this is in Exhibit 145, which is the transcript from Kentucky Law Enforcement Council. You did attend in 2011 the Police Training Officers course, didn't you?
Ma'am, I do not recall.
What is the Police Training Officers course?
Are you referring to the FTO class? The FTO instructor class?
Yes, Police Training Officers Program, March 25th of 2011.
I've never heard described like as that, but I believe what you're referring to is the field training officer, which used to be called a FTO. It was changed at some time, and I don't recall when. But that sounds about the time it was changed from the abbreviation FTO, field training officer, to PTO, which is a probationary training officer.
And what's the purpose of that course?
The probationary training officer class, I believe, was a 40-hour class, and in that we describe, we're trained on how we would go about training new recruits that are coming fresh out of the academy.
Right, so you are trained as an experienced officer. You are trained to then participate in trainings with new recruits.
Yes, ma'am.
And so you did that in 2011, and following that training, then you did participate in the trainings of new recruits.
Yes, but if I can expand on that.
You did participate in trainings of new recruits?
Yes, but not in the traditional sense as the I guess the class would say there.
Explain what you say by the class. Oh, you as a part of the training officer class participated in the training of new recruits
Yes.
over a number of years.
Yes and no. With the PTO program, once you complete the course, you're then a certified probationary training officer, and you will be assigned recruits coming out of the academy. That will be their first phase. They have numerous phases, but one of the first phases they are coming out of the academy is they're assigned to a PTO at that time, which used to be called an FTO. Because of my position in the Flex Platoon in the 6th Division in Newburgh, because of my position at that time, even though I went to the class and completed the PTO phase, the PTO program, I was not assigned recruits. Recruits are not assigned out of the academy, fresh out of the academy. They aren't assigned to a narcotics or a street-level plainclothes platoon for a multitude of reasons, but they are sent to a patrol division, and they ride with a uniformed officer because they are also in uniform in a marked car, and they learn their training program through that PTO, and then they will transfer as it goes to different stages of that program with other officers in different parts of the county.
Now, thank you.
Sure.
I am going to show you what is marked as Commonwealth's Exhibit 160, Commonwealth's Exhibit 161, and Commonwealth's Exhibit 162. These are memorandum. Each one is a memorandum from Chief Conrad, which is a letter of commendation. Actually, it's from Sergeant Jeremy Coleman to Chief Conrad, listing all the PTOs that participated in the recruit training. And then you, Commonwealth Exhibit 160, 161, 162. Looking at Exhibit 160.
Yes, ma'am.
See and it's a memorandum regarding letter of commendation and a list of PTOs or police training officers, and is your name included in that list
Yes, ma'am.
on the bottom right column?
It is.
Would you read that letter or memorandum, please?
Sure. To Chief Stephen Conrad, LMPD, from Sergeant Jeremy Coleman, 3rd Division, Training Division, Special Projects Unit, dated March 7th, 2018, reference to a letter of commendation. Would you like me to read all the names?
No, you don't have to read. You are one of the PTO officers listed there.
Correct.
And what does the body of the memorandum state?
On today's date, the 7th of March, 2018, the police training officers, PTO, listed above volunteered to assist with the Metro Academy Class 40 practicals during the hours of 0830 to 1600 hours. These officers provided the role of the PTO to the recruits of MAC 40. MAC is the abbreviation for Metro Academy Class 40. During the course of the day, the PTO and their recruits responded to a variety of scenarios based on runs ranging from a report run to where the use of force was required. Their coaching and evaluation provided the recruits additional opportunities to learn the scenario and the PTO's knowledge and experiences. The PTOs were vital to the recruits' learning during this time period. The dedication and enthusiasm these officers displayed by volunteering their time to provide their expertise and guidance to the recruits during their final practicals before graduation is outstanding.
So that is a commendation for the group of PTOs, including you, that during the course of the day, you as a PTO and the recruits responded to a variety of scenario-based runs from a report run to a run where the use of force was required. So you did participate as a training officer in that exercise,
Yes, ma'am.
training the new recruits how to respond in one scenario where the use of force was required.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, moving on, and move to Exhibit 160.
Any objection?
No, Judge.
All right, it'll be so admitted.
Now, moving on to Exhibit 161. And what is the date on that memorandum?
August the 2nd of 2018.
Again, it is a memorandum from Sergeant Jeremy Coleman of the Training Division to Chief Conrad. And are you one of the PTOs listed that the letter of commendation is addressed to?
Yes, ma'am.
So would you read the body of this memorandum?
Certainly. On Tuesday, July 31st, 2018, the police training officers listed above volunteered to assist Metro Academy Class 41 practicals. These practicals were different from previous dates as the recruits experienced the challenges that the 12-hour shift represents: run volume, length of shift, and the stresses of the runs themselves to officers. Throughout the course of the day, the PTOs and the recruits responded to a variety of scenario-based runs, ranging from report runs to runs where the use of force was required. The coaching and evaluation that the PTO provided the recruits during and after the scenarios and while in their downtime created additional opportunities to learn from the PTO's knowledge and experience. PTOs, such as these exceptional officers, are a vital key to the success of recruit practicals. The dedication and enthusiasm these officers displayed by volunteering their time to provide their expertise and guidance as PTOs to the recruits of MAC 41 during their final practicals before graduation is outstanding.
So once again, this recruit training occurring in July of 2018, you were one of the training officers who worked with recruits in scenarios, one of which was a scenario where the use of force was required.
On that one, I'm not sure. I know the first one, it mentions a use of force requirement.
The first paragraph, would you read the last sentence?
Sure. To runs where the use of force, yes, ma'am. That's the same as the same
So
explanation
in
first.
this second recruit class in July of 18, you participated in training with recruits in scenarios where the use of force was required.
Yes, ma'am.
Move to admit Exhibit 161.
No objection.
It'll be so admitted.
Now would you look at the next memorandum, which has been marked Exhibit 162? And again, is that a memorandum from Sergeant Coleman of the Training Division to Chief Conrad?
Yes, ma'am.
And what's the date on this memorandum?
December 14th, 2018.
And you are one of the PTOs that this memorandum is addressed to.
Yes, ma'am.
And what does this one state?
On December 10th and 11th, 2018, the recruits of Metro Academy in Class 42 entered their last practical exercises before graduation. These practicals attempt to encompass the basic skills, abilities, and knowledge the members of MAC 42 have learned through their time within the Basic Police Academy into real-world scenarios ranging from report runs, to runs where the use of force was required. The police officers listed above undertook the challenge of coaching/training and the assessment of MAC 42 recruits throughout the practicals. During their downtime and during the end of the day debriefing sessions, the leadership, teaching, and mentoring skills of these officers conveyed during that time was a vital key in helping create additional opportunities for the recruits to learn.
So this third memorandum dated December 2018 was once again a commendation for participating as a training officer with a class of recruits, training, among other things, how to respond in a situation where the use of force is required.
Yes, ma'am.
Move to admit Exhibit 162.
No objection.
It'll be so admitted.
And you stated actually, Officer Gelhausen explained yesterday, qualification with the firearm is required twice a year,
Yes, ma'am.
and you have qualified twice a year during the last 20 years, or during the 20 years that you were a police officer.
I'm not sure what the scheduling was on the qualification in Lexington, but as my time here in Louisville, that I believe it was twice a year. Yes, ma'am.
And that involves, as we heard, scenarios, various stages as we went through with Officer Gelhausen in the use of the duty weapon and the firing under time constraints at what he referred to as the LMP target blue, LMPD blue. And what is the LMPD blue at the firing range?
If I'm not mistaken, I don't have anything to reference, but I believe it is a blue colored target and it is a silhouette of a human, I believe.
Well, sir, you have participated in the training out at the Louisville Metro Police Firearms for approximately 17 years. And I think my question is, what is the LMPD blue target?
The best of my knowledge is what I just described, but we have different targets for different qualifications. So, and they have different, not exhibit, but different target numbers, and they're called different things. So there's literally a table from here to the jury box full of these paper targets with different scenarios on them. Let me rephrase, with different targets on them. Some can be a person, some can be a silhouette, some can be a Coke bottle, some can be little, as I was shown yesterday into the record, the little small circles that are all over a target. And I don't know, Ms. Whaley, what exactly each target looks like just by their name. I would have to see it.
Well, Officer Gelhausen explained that in the morning qualification with the duty weapon, it is in fact the blue silhouette of an adult person, life-size adult blue silhouette. Do you recall that?
I recall his testimony, and I have no reason to dispute that.
But I'm asking you, aside from Officer Gelhausen's testimony, is that how you recall the target at the firing range when you qualify with the duty weapon in the morning of the fall qualification?
I do not recall that specific target, no ma'am.
Now, you stated that I believe you testified that you had not been involved in a critical incident
I don't believe.
until this situation on March 13th, 2020.
I don't believe that's what I said.
Had you been involved in a critical incident then, prior to March 13, 2020?
I think the question asked was whether or not I was involved in a shooting before, and I said, no, I had not discharged my firearm. Critical incidents, can you be more specific?
Have you been involved previously with an incident involving a barricaded subject with a gun?
Yes, but I don't recall. I'm sure I have, and I don't have any reason not to believe, but I believe that's happened more than once.
Okay, handing you another memorandum that has been marked Commonwealth's Exhibit 163. If you would, look at that memorandum. And who is the author, well, who is the memorandum written to?
It's written to me.
And at the time, what division were you a part of? It's underneath your name.
Sorry. Charlie District.
And who is the memorandum from?
Colonel Robert White.
And this is regarding letter of appreciation? that
Yes,
what-
yes, ma'am.
And go ahead and read the content of this memorandum.
Yes, ma'am. Recently, I received a letter commending you for your professionalism and outstanding performance in your assistance in an incident occurring at 7919 Ivory Court. I understand the subject of this location had barricaded himself in the house with several weapons and ammunition. In a timely fashion, you were able to set up an inner perimeter and make contact with the subject, as well as gather other critical information from the subject's family. Teamwork and patience from all units involved in this incident allowed for the situation to be resolved with the subject surrendering. I appreciate your willingness to put forth extra effort in doing your job. You have helped showcase the professionalism and dedication of the Louisville Metro Police Department.
So in this situation, the subject was barricaded in the house with several weapons and ammunition. And you made contact with the subject, and the situation was resolved.
That's what the letter says, yes, ma'am.
That's what the letter says. Do you recall this incident?
I do not.
You do not. Okay, move to admit Exhibit 163.
No objection.
It'll be so admitted.
Now, you stated that I believe you said approximately 5 years, you were a member of the Merit Board with Louisville Metro Police.
Yes, ma'am, approximately, and can I expand on that?
The question is, were you a member of the Merit Board for approximately 5 years?
Combined, yes, approximately 5 years.
And the Merit Board hears cases involving officers that have violated a regulation or a rule or have been disciplined in some way. Does the Merit Board hear those cases?
The Merit Board hears appeals made by the officer after they are disciplined and or terminated.
So through all those years of being a member of the Merit Board, is it your testimony that you had no knowledge or did not know the regulations of the protocols of the Public Integrity Unit?
No, none of our cases, to my recollection, involved the PIU unit as in a shooting investigatory way. None of our Merit Board cases were for that. Most of the time they were for smaller things, for, I don't want to say, but just smaller policy violations.
Now, let's move on to the search warrant that you, I believe you stated you volunteered to be a member of the team on March 12th.
What I said was I volunteered via email back to Sergeant Meany of PBI stating that I was available when requested for manpower.
And how many officers were on the team that served the warrant?
On Springfield Drive? I believe 7 total.
Now, I believe you stated that they were all from different units, that they had not worked together? Is that your testimony?
Yes, ma'am. We were all part of CID, but we were assigned to different platoons within CID. I don't believe any of us worked for the same platoon or under the same supervisor.
Hand you what's marked Commonwealth Exhibit 164.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that an organizational chart of the CID? Criminal Interdiction Division?
That's what appears so, yes, ma'am.
And the date on this org chart is February 2020.
That's the date at the top,
Correct.
yes, ma'am.
Now, which unit are you in listed on here?
Complaint Response Squad number 1, which is commonly referred to as CRU 1.
And where is Detective Campbell? I believe you'll see his name circled there. Which unit is he in?
Place-based investigations, also known as PBI.
So that is a separate unit from the unit you were in. Now, where is Sergeant Mattingly, Detective Nobles, and Detective Tony James?
Those 3, sergeant and both detectives, are listed under the interdiction squad. However, Tony James falls under that, but he is assigned to the Jefferson County Sheriff's joint interdiction unit. So while he technically has a sergeant, he doesn't report to Sergeant Mattingly on a daily basis. He's in a uniform, and he's not with us normally. He's on the interstate doing interdiction work. But he falls under LMPD Sergeant
So
Mattingly.
the interdiction squad includes Sergeant Mattingly, Detective Nobles, and Detective Tony James in the same unit.
Yes.
And you stated that you, even though not in the same unit with Mattingly, you did know Mattingly, you were a friend of Mattingly's.
Correct.
Now, where is Detective Cosgrove?
He's under the Street Squad number 1, which would be also referred to as VCS 1.
So as we see it, move to admit Exhibit 164.
No objection.
It'll be so admitted.
So as we see on this org chart, the officers that served the warrant that night were not all in different units, were they?
Well, as it looks on this sheet, no, but like I expanded on, Tony James is not assigned, or he falls under the interdiction squad, but he's not with that unit on a regular basis. Detective Stone and Detective Nobles, which is beside 1341 and 1342, those are our parcel interdiction units. So they're assigned separately out to the airport or other areas of town where parcels are received or shipped from, but they will answer to Sergeant Mattingly.
So you attended the briefing at the CID office that day, March 12th. You saw the whiteboard. And then you came to the meeting at the church parking lot later that evening.
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that true?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I want you to us to look at Exhibit 71, which has already been admitted. Laser pointer, may I approach?
You may.
Laser pointer.
Yes, ma'am.
Address the screen behind you or the screen to your right here, and show us, you stated that you were driving your own vehicle
My police-issued vehicle, yes, ma'am.
with your canine, with your dog in the vehicle.
Correct.
So you drove by yourself. How did you come into the complex? Show the route, please, that you took in.
Sure. You can't see it because it's off the display here, but, like I've said twice, I forget the name of this road. This is St. Andrew's Church or St. Anthony Church that comes up here. And then we passed the location and came up and around, and there's a top of the hill here. And then we kind of serpentine down through this parking lot in this fashion.
And where did you park your vehicle?
Somewhere, there's a dumpster here, and I parked somewhere right in this area. But I pulled straight in.
So you came down past those buildings that are right across from 3003.
Yes, ma'am.
Again, point out where that is on the photo.
Point out where what is, ma'am?
The route you came in before you parked.
Sure.
Okay. Now, you had served a warrant in that area previously, hadn't you?
Not near that, I'm sorry, not in that complex, but I believe upon coming up St. Andrew's Church or St. Anthony Church, the one that's the main road out here. Like I said, I've never worked in the 3rd Division or the South End, but we're down there every once in a while, so I'm not familiar with the streets. However, this main road, I noticed a side street up here, and I forget, the name escapes me, prior to Springfield, that I did recognize as a place that we had done a search warrant when I was in the major case unit years prior. And I just recognized that from seeing the sign, and I knew it was at the end of the dead end of the road on the left. That's all that I can remember.
But you recognized the area, you had been in that area.
No, I was very unfamiliar with the area. I recognized that street when we passed it.
You had been to that street previously serving a search warrant.
The street down here, yes, ma'am.
Had the other vehicles arrived prior to you, or did they arrive after you arrived and parked by the dumpster?
When we left the church, we kind of, looks like we always do, when we have a rally point, we'll just kind of caravan we try to condense, now it's easier said than done, but to condense down to as few cars as possible. And the reason that we do that is when you're driving up to a target location in the middle of the night and somebody looks out their window and sees 7 cars following each other down the street, I think that's a little suspicious and might kind of blow our cover, so to speak. So we try to condense down to as few cars as possible. I'm not sure how many cars we condense down into. I never condense down into another car because I have my dog in the kennel in the back, so I never leave my dog if I can help it. Sometimes another officer detective might jump in with me in my front seat, and they might ride with me to the location, leaving a certain amount of cars there at that rally point, and then we retrieve those cars later, which is what happened in this case.
My question was, did you arrive before the other vehicles, or did they arrive after you?
I was maybe second to the last in line of that caravan after it left the church.
And you exited your vehicle and walked down the parking lot or the sidewalk toward 3003?
I exited here, and at some point I made it up the way to the sidewalk, which was up in this area right in through here, between this entrance and this entrance.
Now, this building, point out where the entrance is to 3003, please.
It has 2 entrances, ma'am, to my knowledge. I thought this was an entrance and this was an entrance, but I could be wrong.
In fact, the top, the first entrance that you would come to from where you parked, that's not 3003 Springfield, is it?
It says 3003 on top of the building, ma'am. I thought the whole thing was 3003. I'm sorry. I don't know what that address is then. If that's not 3003, close to where I parked my vehicle there, then I wouldn't know
And then,
this address.
so that, you walked past that first set of doorways. You want to point out that first set? So you walked past those, which also you saw one patio on the right, one patio on the left, one at the top right, and one at the top left. In that first entrance, before you got to 3000, apartment 4. You want to point out that first set of patios and balconies that you walked past? Then you kept on walking, and where's the entrance to apartment 4?
Going by this satellite map, the number 4 looks like it's on the left side of this building.
So that's where the group gathered to make entrance. That's where the group of 7 gathered to make entrance into apartment 4.
We actually didn't gather right in front of there. That tactically wouldn't be a great idea. We gathered, came together in a single file type line between these entrances here. Like I said, some of the detectives were parked in the middle of the lot, just out in the middle of the lot, and left their cars there. Some had pulled into parking places. I don't know where everybody came from or any idea where anybody even parked. All I know is the group had already begun to accumulate here, and I fell in behind because I was, like I said, I was the second to last or the last vehicle coming into the complex in the caravan, and I jumped in right here as they were already walking up towards the apartment.
If we could have Exhibit 19 displayed, please. Directing your attention to what's been admitted as Exhibit 19. This is the entrance to the breezeway, is it not?
That's what it appears.
And we see the last 3 numbers there, 003. Now, what position did you take as you walked from the sidewalk up to this breezeway? Point out what position you were in.
It would have been over here is where the sidewalk where I just mentioned, and we came up from this direction.
And again, I want you to focus on where you were at this point. So where were you standing? And at what position did you take?
At that point, when I approached, I believe I was maybe second to the last or second or third to the last in line of the as the stack approached through here.
Well, where were you standing?
When we first walked up, I was right here.
And who was behind you? Anyone?
The best of my recollection is Detective Campbell was still behind me. I believe everybody else was in front of me at that time.
Positioned how? Where was Lieutenant Hoover?
That I don't know, ma'am, because everybody was crammed in this area right here. So I can't tell you exactly where Detective Hoover was, but he had, when he walked up, I believe he was in front of me in the line, or in the stack. So Mattingly, Cosgrove, Detective James, his shield, and I believe, I think that's it, were already standing in this area right here.
So everybody was standing there just standing together, standing next to each other, right there in that vestibule?
Well, yes and no. The reason being, usually we'll come in a more tactical sense, I guess, because we'll have a person on each side of the door.
I didn't ask you what you would do. I asked you what did happen,
Yes, ma'am. Everybody was bunched together right here.
except you and Campbell.
Well, I was here, like I said, and that's which allowed me access, or allowed me to see up the top of this stairway.
And where was Campbell?
the best of my recollection, ma'am, he was somewhere in here. I believe I heard him behind me, but he was not involved in any verbal exchange with anyone.
Okay, well, I didn't ask you about a verbal exchange. I just asked you when everyone walked up, what positions did they take? And you just explained that you were back at the end of the steps, or maybe a little bit in front of the last step, or the first step, and everybody else was bunched up in the vestibule except Campbell.
To the best of my
Correct.
recollection, yes, ma'am.
Now, how did the process begin of trying to execute the search warrant at that point?
Sergeant Mattingly was the first to knock on the door. And
Could you see from where you were back at the end of the steps here? So we have you and Campbell back there, and so 5 other men are bunched together in the vestibule. Could you see Mattingly?
I didn't concentrate necessarily on seeing Mattingly. I could hear him knocking and announcing from right here, but I think he was blocked by maybe another officer or another detective, and I don't know who that was. I didn't feel like I had a free view in to see where he was at, because I know Detective Nobles was there with the ram, and that kind of takes up a whole extra body carrying the ram around.
You heard Sergeant Mattingly begin to knock?
Yes, ma'am. And then I could
Did
visually.
you see Sergeant Mattingly knocking from where you were at the end of the steps?
Yes, ma'am.
You could see him, in spite of there being 5 men in the vestibule, you could see Sergeant Mattingly knocking.
Yes, ma'am.
And did he say anything when he started knocking?
He made announcements as he was knocking.
Announcements of what?
Police search warrant.
Then what happened?
He continued knocking and continued announcing, and others, and I don't know who, joined in with the announcement.
Where was Detective Nobles when Sergeant Mattingly was knocking on the door?
To the best of my recollection, I'm pointing it on the steps, but actually he was to the right of apartment 4, between the steps and Sergeant Mattingly, or just to the right of that door there.
Between this, just to the right of the door and not in front of the door? Not next to the door or not back, not in relation to the threshold, where was Detective Nobles?
Just to the right of the threshold then. If you're talking about the threshold of number 4, he was to the right of that.
And where was Detective Cosgrove?
I don't recall in the vestibule Cosgrove's exact location.
Where was Detective James?
They were all in front of me, positioned in front of me at that time.
Well, position in front of you, and you were still back at the end of the steps?
I was still in the same spot. I haven't moved yet, or you haven't told me where we're going. Or let me rephrase. The last place you asked me about was here, and I haven't moved since that location during our conversation.
And you have indicated that while you were still there, Detective Nobles was to the side of the threshold, and Sergeant Mattingly was knocking on the door. So they have now moved out of the bunched up group that you first said they were arranged in when coming
ma'am.
up.
Everybody's still bunched up here. There's just nowhere else to go because it's such a small area.
Did you see Detective James while Sergeant Mattingly was knocking?
Don't think I could give you his exact location. I knew he was in front of me in the vestibule.
So everybody was in front of you in the vestibule,
With the exception of Detective Campbell.
Campbell.
Yes, ma'am.
You don't know where Detective James was?
No, but I took notice that he had a shield now, or a bunker, which I think I actually first took notice of that when we were walking up on the sidewalk, which was super uncommon. I've never been trained to make entry with a bunker. That's usually something that's done with SRT, our Special Response Team, or a SWAT team.
Or I didn't ask you about whether you were trained with the bunker. So you said everybody at first was gathered in a bunch in the vestibule. Now you have established that Sergeant Mattingly was at the door knocking. Detective Nobles was to the right of the threshold with the ram. Now I asked you, where was Detective Cosgrove? You said you didn't know. I have now asked you, where was Detective James?
In front of me, between myself and these two doors somewhere.
But you don't know where.
Okay.
And where was Lieutenant Hoover?
Lieutenant Hoover was also up there between me and the doors, and I can't give you his exact location.
Did you see Detective Hoover?
Lieutenant Hoover, I don't
I'm
remember.
sorry, Lieutenant Hoover. Did you see him?
I don't recall. I mean, I knew he was there, but I don't remember seeing him for any reason.
Now, continue on explaining the chronology. While Sergeant Mattingly was knocking and saying police search warrant, then what happened?
Sergeant Mattingly knocked, announced police search warrant repeatedly. Other officers, and I don't know who, also you could hear them verbalize police search warrant or Metro Police search warrant. And after some time of banging on the door and knocking, Mr., who I know to be Mr. Sarpay now, exited this apartment here, which now I know to be apartment 8.
Where were you at that time?
I could hear the door open, I could hear him speak to us, and I was still here, now looking up and engaged him in conversation.
And how did you engage Mr. Sarpay?
Mr. Sarpay seemed very irritated or agitated that we were there and that he wanted us, he made it clear that he wasn't happy with us being there, and he came out aggressive and like yelling, and I said, police, search warrant, and he argued some more. He didn't follow orders. I told him to go back in his apartment. I didn't want him out or anybody out in the hallway while we were attempting to execute this warrant. I tried to get him back inside. He was very argumentative and then eventually did go back inside.
How long were you engaging with Mr. Sarpay?
A matter of, I would say, around 10 seconds, maybe a little longer.
Well, didn't Sergeant Mattingly address you in the process of you arguing with Sarpay? Didn't Sergeant Mattingly tell you to cease doing that?
He did. He said, leave it or forget about it.
He said,
one or the
leave him
other.
alone?
Leave it or forget about it. Like,
So
ignore it.
Sergeant Mattingly took his attention off of the knocking and announcing and addressed you in this situation with Mr. Sarpay.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Sarpay went back into the apartment upstairs.
He did. He closed the door, and then I thought he was gone, and then he immediately opened the door back up and said something else, and I don't recall what that was, and like he was getting his last couple words in, and then he closed the door, and that was the last interaction I had with him at that time.
Go ahead with the chronology. After Mr. Sarpay went back in the apartment upstairs, what happened?
The knocking and announcing resumed. Sergeant Mattingly had stopped for a brief time I think we're all kind of distracted by Sarpay, and which wasn't common. It was usually if somebody comes out, they see the police, or we say police, they immediately go back in. And so it was a distraction for sure. But after that, Sarpay closed the door the final time. That, like I said, that was the last I saw of him. The knocking and announcing then continued by Sergeant Mattingly on the door.
Where were you at that time?
I had moved up a little bit. Now there's no threat up here, anybody to challenge to get back in their apartment. And Sergeant Mattingly had taken his advice and disengaged conversation. And then I moved up a little bit from where I was at. So just probably not a couple feet.
And why did you move up?
Well, a couple reasons. Detective Nobles, it was about that time I felt, and it's usually a supervisor or commanding officer's decision when the door should be breached, and that usually we do not have a lieutenant with us. So in my mind, it was the sergeant was waiting on the lieutenant to make the call. Usually it's just a sergeant and detectives there, 99%, 98% of the time. But Lieutenant Hoover was on this search warrant with us for whatever reason. And so I think by Sergeant Mattingly continuously knocking, somebody was waiting for a commanding officer's decision to make that call for the door to be breached, or there had been enough time had passed that the door needed to be breached at that point.
And you were still, you said you moved up a little bit, but you were still the last one except Campbell.
Yes, ma'am. I had moved up into the kind of this bunch is the best word I can use to describe it. But now I was closer to Detective Nobles, who was in this area, like I said before, to the right of the door.
And still everybody's up there. Hoover, Cosgrove, James, Nobles, Mattingly, and now you have stepped up a few steps.
Yes, ma'am. They are more in this area. They're more behind Sergeant Mattingly, but still, all of us are bunched up in this.
Bunched up.
Yes, ma'am.
And you indicated someone, either Lieutenant Hoover gave the directive to go ahead and breach because there had been no response to the knocking and announcing? Is that why the decision was made to breach the door?
That's my understanding, ma'am, yes.
What happened as the door, explain how the door was breached.
Sure. Once Lieutenant Hoover, I believe, gave the order to breach the door, Sergeant Mattingly either moved back or to his left a little bit out of the way. Obviously, you cannot be in the way of the ram. Detective Nobles began working on the door, and he then, the best way for me to describe it is that he stood in a position to his left. So as I'm looking at the door would be here, and began hitting the door with the ram.
We have Exhibit 5. This is Exhibit 5 that's been admitted. Address, if you would, Exhibit 5 with the pointer and explain where Detective Nobles was standing when he began to breach the door.
Sure. He was in this area. And then he moved up to work on the door here. So, in this, I think the battery's dead on this. It keeps going off, but he's hitting it from left to right, standing facing. Detective Nobles would be facing apartment 3 at this point.
Permission to approach. Give you another laser pointer.
Thank you.
So, point out again where Detective Nobles was.
Sure. Here, prior to breach, and then he scoots over so he can put force on the door.
And then what happened?
He hit the door 2 times. It's hard to see in this picture, but you can start to see the door itself start to buckle a bit as he's hitting it with the ram. And I believe on the third swing, that's when the door came off of the strike plate in the handle area and opened just like it is there.
Open just like it is there. Is that what you remember? Or is that what we're seeing? Are you saying that because we're seeing it here in this picture?
I was giving a visual for the jury. Is that how the door opened after he struck it? So in that manner, I'm not saying that's exactly how far it was open. Maybe I misspoke, but that's the way the door opened inward.
Where were you?
At this point, I'm now moved up to here in this area.
And where is Cosgrove, Hoover, James, I'm assuming Campbell is still at the back. Where are Cosgrove, Hoover, and James when the door is breached?
They would have been in this area here. So to my left, let me rephrase. Mattingly, Hoover,
Can we see the pointer?
sure. Mattingly, Hoover, and this is not in a specific order. We're in this area. Sergeant Mattingly was the one knocking on the door, so he was closest to the door, and everyone else was back here. Detective Cosgrove, I don't remember if he was to my right or my left, but he was somewhere in this area.
Did you see the door open when Nobles performed the last hit on it, which broke the door lock and open?
Yes,
Did you
ma'am.
see the door open?
Yes, ma'am.
Where were you standing?
Right in this area here.
And where was Cosgrove, James, and Hoover?
I don't remember Cosgrove specifically. I just know Sarge was here in this area, and everybody else would have been in this area.
And what happened when the door was breached?
When the door was breached, Detective Nobles here, like I think's been put into record, he's unarmed. He then hits the ram the last time, and then he spins away. So coming back towards me, or back towards the stairwell, out of harm's way, from here reverses out to here. Now I don't know how far he went back, or if he went against that wall.
Well, you were standing there.
I wasn't watching Detective Nobles, ma'am. I was watching that door.
You weren't watching Nobles?
No, ma'am. I was watching the door at that point.
Did you watch him when he breached the door,
I did.
but then you quit watching him?
Yeah, I took my eyes off him. There was no reason to watch Detective Nobles after the door was breached.
What happened when the door was breached?
Then I immediately can see down the right side of this hallway to a dark apartment, a completely pitch black apartment.
Where is Sergeant Mattingly when the door was breached?
I never looked over at Sergeant. I never looked left, or I had no reason to look at the other officers because my attention was now focused down this hallway.
You had been watching Sergeant Mattingly when he was knocking and announcing?
Intermittently, yes. I wasn't concentrating my attention on him because, like I said, I was distracted by Mr. Sharpe.
No, after Mr. Sarkbay had gone back into the apartment upstairs, and then attention was directed back to the knocking, and then the decision or the order was given to breach. Detective Nobles then began the banging to the breach. You weren't watching Mattingly?
After the door was breached, no, ma'am.
You don't know what Mattingly did?
No, I didn't have any attention towards any reason to have any attention on Sergeant Mattingly.
When the door was breached, how far open did it swing?
To my best recollection, the door was all the way open. It opened up all the way.
And did you see Mattingly step over the threshold, begin to step into apartment 4 after the door was breached?
I did not.
You did not. Did you know Sergeant Mattingly received gunfire?
I did.
How did you know that?
Well, like I said, the apartment was dark, and it was immediately illuminated by the muzzle flash of a firearm.
But you weren't watching. You don't know where Sergeant Mattingly was. You just said.
That's correct. I never saw Sergeant Mattingly cross the threshold.
So, what did you see after the door, as you said, swung all the way open? You didn't see Sergeant Mattingly stepping in. What did you see?
I saw darkness, and then I immediately saw a large muzzle flash. I could feel the percussion of a gun, of a percussion from the discharge of a firearm. And with the illumination of the muzzle flash, I could see now, I now had a backdrop and a visual of a silhouette of a person in a combat shooting stance here, directed with a gun directed at us directly.
Where were you standing?
Just to the right of this, or
I would like you to point with the laser pointer where you were standing when you saw this muzzle flash.
sure. I was, as Detective Cosgrove, excuse me, Detective Nobles rotated out with the ram, I moved up into this empty void. There was a large void here created by him swinging this ram back and forth, back and forth. So when he did his job on the door and breached it and moved out, I then moved up to here.
So you were in the threshold.
No, I never got in the threshold, no ma'am. I wasn't up as far.
Doormat,
I'm sorry?
the doormat there,
I was probably near the doormat. I don't know if I stepped on the doormat or I was directly in this area right here.
and you saw the muzzle flash.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you get shot?
No, ma'am.
And did that muzzle, you said when you saw the muzzle flash, and because of the muzzle flash, you were able to see a figure behind the muzzle flash? Is that what you stated?
I don't believe that's how I stated. I said the muzzle flash illuminated the room or the hallway to where I could see the silhouette of a human in a shooting stance.
And did that pose a threat to you?
Yes,
So did you respond to that threat?
I did.
You shot?
I did.
How many times did you shoot there standing on the mat?
Oh, I didn't shoot from the mat, ma'am.
When you saw the muzzle flash and the figure, you said, after the flash illuminated the hallway, did that appear to be an active threat to you,
Yes, ma'am.
firing in your direction,
Yes, ma'am.
and you did not return fire?
Ma'am.
Why not?
Because we were in this fatal funnel.
What did you do?
From my position here, when I saw the threat, I immediately reversed direction, spun out, and went back the breezeway towards the direction that we came from, towards the sidewalk.
Let me go back to Exhibit 19. You went in which direction from this,
Back to where we came from.
from the doormat?
This way. So from here, and here.
And then what did you do?
I made this corner of the building because I knew I had to respond, and I couldn't do it from the fatal funnel. And as I moved around,
You knew you had to respond, but you didn't respond while seeing the direct threat right in front of you, you couldn't respond or didn't respond. The
Like-
active threat.
like I said, I didn't respond because we were in that funnel.
So you turned around, came out of the breezeway, and what did you do?
I made this corner here, and I think it's off the picture. If you have a wider picture I can use, but I made this turn here towards, I forget which direction that is, but back towards the way in which I came from or I parked at.
So you came out toward the sidewalk then? Is that your testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you do then?
As I made the corner of the building, I had, like I stated before, I had heard the shooting, and then I heard this gunfire intensify to where it would be like a semi-automatic rifle-style sounds. Loud percussion coming out of that breezeway, and like a
We can look up now at Exhibit 33, please. And now point out where you, as you came out the breezeway, where you went.
I came out of the breezeway and to this direction. So I don't know if I used this wheelchair ramp or if I made it to the actual sidewalk. I'm not sure of my exact placement.
Well, where were you when you started shooting through the sliding glass doors?
I was somewhere in this area.
Were you on, those are two different sidewalk. The sidewalk adjacent to the railing, were you there or were you over by the cars that were pulled in, the parking lot there?
Like I said, I don't recall if I was actually on this ramp, this wheelchair ramp, or if I was in this sidewalk area.
And what did you do?
I noticed, I observed, I heard the audible semi-automatic gunfire that sounded like rifle fire. I saw the sliding glass door lighting up, illuminating with the muzzle flashes. As I heard the gun go off, I could see the muzzle flash illumination or the strobing of that sliding glass door, of the curtains and blinds from that area.
You said curtains and blinds. Now, had you been inside the apartment before?
I had not.
And how did you know there were curtains and blinds?
Because I saw the pictures and entered into Discovery.
I'm talking about the night this happened, on March 13th.
Okay.
What did you see through the sliding glass doors as you were shooting through them?
I could see these, I believe they're vertical blinds.
So you saw vertical blinds.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, when you approached that apartment back at the initial approach, when you walked down the sidewalk to make entrance into the breezeway, you had taken note of those sliding doors, didn't you?
I recognize them because anytime we walk past the target location, you want to keep your eye or give it your attention to whatever windows or doors are in play at that target location. So I looked over there, I guess, maybe briefly, and identified no threats at those.
And there was no activity, you indicated. You couldn't see anything.
Not to my knowledge.
So you came out here and you were standing somewhere out in here and you were shooting through the sliding glass doors. How many times did you shoot through those?
How many times do I think I shot through them that night, or how many times did I learn that I shot through them?
How many times did you intend to shoot through the doors?
I shot through the doors 5 times from here.
At this time, where was your fellow officers? Mattingly, Nobles, Hoover, James, Cosgrove, and Campbell?
To the best of my knowledge, now I didn't give any attention back or look back. Now I'm out of view of the rest of my platoon. So I can hear John say I'm down or I'm hit, and I know he's down. I see the other or hear the other officers attempting to help him. It almost sounds like material dragging across the ground is what I could hear after he says I'm down, the firing, and it sounds like a commotion, like they're stuck, like they're trying to drag him out. That's, this happened in a second or two, 3 seconds. So that was my perception at the time, that they are now taking automatic gunfire where they're stuck in this fatal funnel with Sergeant Mattingly down. And that's my characterization of what was taking place as I'm returning fire with my only option to return fire through this window to stop this threat inside.
What were you aiming at?
The threat. The strobing.
The threat you had seen when you were standing on the doormat and saw the figure at the end of the hallway? And what kind of gun did you say that you thought that was?
It appeared to be, at the time, a a shoulder holstered long rifle, or an AR-15
So
style.
that's what you labeled as the active threat.
Yes, ma'am.
But you didn't shoot at the active threat until you got around to the parking lot.
I was never in the parking lot. ma'am.
Shot through the sliding glass doors,
Yes, ma'am.
aiming at that threat you had seen at the end of the hallway.
Well, the threat that I saw at the end of the hallway, now I see a bright strobing illumination of these, and I can hear the rapid gunfire coming out of this breezeway. And it's my understanding at that time that they were taking that rapid rifle fire down in the hallway and they were being executed.
Did your fellow officers return fire who were in the vestibule, in the foyer? Did your fellow officers return fire?
Did I know that now or do I know that then?
At the time you were there, did your fellow officers return fire?
I found out later they did.
So you saw the muzzle flash at the end of the hall and you did not return fire, and you don't know if your fellow officers returned fire.
I could hear guns going back and forth. I could only assume they were, but I did not know for a fact that they shot while I was here.
You assume that they were returning fire?
I could hear, it sounded like, ma'am, different calibers being exchanged, and then that, like I said before, that automatic rifle or a semi-automatic rifle fire.
So you thought you heard different guns going back and forth
It sounded like a
while
fire.
you were standing outside the sliding glass door?
Yes, ma'am, it sounded like a firefight.
Well, were you concerned that if you shot through the sliding door, you might hit one of your fellow officers?
Absolutely not.
Did you feel guilty running out of the breezeway, leaving your fellow officers in the fatal funnel?
I did not.
They stayed in the breezeway and you left.
That's my understanding.
After firing your shots through the sliding door, what did you do?
After shooting those rounds through the sliding glass door, the firing did not stop. It continued. I noticed the two bedroom windows, which I know to be bedroom windows now, the two windows immediately adjacent to the sliding glass door, were also being illuminated with that strobing muzzle flash. I could hear the gunfire coming out of the hallway, and I could see those I could see the illumination from the strobing, the muzzle flash lighting those windows up. I recalling where I had saw the shooter last prior to moving. I knew that I had a more accurate shot at that threat at the end of the hallway if in fact I delivered rounds through that bedroom, as it's referred to now, bedroom 2 window.
Where were you when you shot through the bedroom window? And this is Exhibit 32, now up on the screen. Where were you standing when you shot through the bedroom window?
Ma'am, I don't know if it's in this frame because I can't tell how far this is away from the door, but it would have been somewhere in here, whether it be the sidewalk or that area.
Exhibit 31, which now shows both the sliding glass door and the window. Point out where you moved from having shot through the sliding door up here. Where were you standing when you shot through the bedroom window?
I would have moved after I delivered these rounds through the sliding window with no result on the threat. I then continued to my right, or closest, I guess, to this truck bumper, and returned fire through bedroom 2 window.
And is it your testimony that you saw an active threat through the bedroom window?
Yes, ma'am. Like I just stated, I had a bright illumination still from these windows. Could hear the
I
gunfire.
can't see where you're pointing.
I'm sorry. Through the bedroom window, lighting up, the flashing, the strobing, and I knew my threat when I first observed it was, and it's hard to show here, but would be right there in that hallway.
With the AR
Positioned in a combat shooting stance, yes.
at the end of the hallway.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know how many shots did you intend to shoot through the bedroom window?
5 rounds.
What did you do then?
After putting those 5 rounds through the window, through bedroom 2 window, I stopped to assess, and the threat was stopped. The threat stopped. No more firing could be heard or seen, or the strobing of the muzzle flash could be seen.
Stop to assess. Did you stop to assess after your first round through the bedroom window?
Yes, ma'am. That assessment would have been made from where I shot first to where I shot the second.
So after every shot through the bedroom window, you assessed and you still saw an active threat?
I didn't say that. No.
What did you say?
I said after 5 rounds, I assessed those rounds through that bedroom window, and I noticed I could tell there was no further threat. I stopped shooting.
So you did not assess whether there was still an active threat after your first shot through the bedroom window?
No, because I was still getting that stimulus from that bedroom window, and from the audible coming from the breezeway.
And the audible what?
Gunshots
From where?
from coming out into the breezeway area.
So you were seeing a threat, active threat, through the bedroom window, but you were hearing gunfire in the breezeway.
Well, like I tried to explain, maybe I did a poor job. I could see the illumination, the strobing in the bedroom window, and I could hear the gunfire, which matched that strobing.
From the breezeway. What happened then?
The threat had stopped, and I believe I moved back, possibly to a cover type position. I did not know at that time how many shots I'd fired, and I thought it was probably appropriate to do a tactical reload.
In the parking lot.
Yes, ma'am.
So you reloaded, and then what happened?
I could hear out in the parking lot, we've seen pictures, I could hear, I guess we skipped a part, ma'am, but after the shooting here, I could to my left, and I never looked back left, but I could hear some type of commotion over here. It sounded like grown men wrestling on the ground with clothes on is what it sounded like. And I didn't know exactly what happened, but there was no sparring verbally or anything to go along with that. I did not take my eyes off of that, of the threat. But I could hear a commotion, like people were on the ground wrestling, but I could hear voices of people that I recognized that were there. I believe Tony James or Lieutenant Hoover said, "I have a tourniquet," or "We need a tourniquet." So I knew there was, I knew Sergeant Mangley was, I knew he'd been hit, and I knew he's bleeding, and I knew they needed a tourniquet. I could hear that going on in the parking lot. Now, I'm alone. Everybody else's efforts are to save Sergeant Mangley's life, and I'm kind of there by myself. So I get on the radio.
When you left the breezeway, did you look back? When you walked when you left the breezeway and left them in the fatal funnel, did you look back?
No.
So at some point, you learn Mattingly has been shot. You, then as you say, hear this scuffling around, people tending. You find out everyone is tending to Mattingly.
And if I could be a little more specific.
You've got,
about that.
you answered my question.
Okay, thank you.
You got on the radio then and called for, radio that an officer was down and called for backup or call for patrol.
I switched to the primary channel. Our channels aren't, our narcotics channels are not monitored by patrol, nor are they recorded. So I got on a primary channel that has a dispatcher actually listening. Our channels, our narcotics channels, don't have a dispatcher. We can't talk to someone and say, hey, come help us. There's nobody listening. It's just for us to communicate with each other. So I switched my radio to a primary channel, be it the wrong one. I still got to a primary channel, which was the downtown channel, and put out the 1030 officer needs assistance. The dispatcher immediately responded to me, what is your location? They did not know where, for some reason, they did not know where we were at. Usually that's done in the briefing, or the case officer will notify Metro Safe of our location of the warrant, so they'll know where we're at in case something like this happens, but that didn't happen in this case. They had no idea where I was at, so they asked for a location. I couldn't give them one because I didn't know the address. Got my phone out and remembered the whiteboard picture I'd taken previously at CID office and got it bigger and zoomed in, and it appeared to be 3007 Springfield. And that's the address I called out on the 1030. While doing so, I said, I want responding officers to come with long rifle. We're engaged, or we were met with rifle fire. I need patrol officers with rifles to respond. Because not all patrol officers have rifles. That's kind
You
of a-
specifically told them to get the patrol to bring long rifles.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's why they all showed up with long rifles. And then when they got there, you told the patrol where to go to cover. And did you send them to the back of the building?
I don't recall sending anybody to the back. I did mention that we needed somebody. I believe at some point in my radio transmission, I advised somebody needed to be back there. And like I said before, I was worried that the person was going out the back window or the back door, and we had nobody. I know we had nobody back there because everyone that showed up at the stack, usually we'll have two officers or two detectives peel off and go around and cover the back, and we didn't do that on this warrant.
Well, how did you know there was a back door?
I did not know there was a back door. I just assumed there was a back window or a back door. That's what I was afraid. The subject, the shooter, was escaping out that direction.
You stayed out in front of this building as patrol arrived and began to point their long rifles at both the front and the back. You were out there for quite a while. In fact, then when, you later found out, Kenneth Walker came out, and you were initially the one directing him, weren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
So you were out there. After you called for on radio, and before Kenneth Walker came out, you were out still in the front watching this entrance and these windows and this sliding door that you had shot through, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I actually put my light on one of these vehicles right here, on the hood or trunk of the vehicle parked here, and left it there so we could light up the target location. So when officers responded, they just didn't run up into this active shooting situation.
Because that's before SWAT got there.
Yes, ma'am.
And so the door to apartment 4 was still open.
Ma'am, I never went back into the breezeway, so I couldn't say whether it is or wasn't.
You were in the parking lot.
Yes, ma'am. I'm now behind a position of cover. It's like I stated, I'm worried for my personal safety because I have a handgun, and it's my understanding the shooter has a long rifle, and I needed to get some type of cover between me and the shooter. Had that person emerge from the complex, I would have at least a vehicle engine or something to have behind cover to return.
Well, the door to apartment 4 was still open. So if you were worried about a shooter still being in there, you would have obviously been wanting to watch the door, the front door, would you not?
Yes, ma'am, and that's why I positioned the patrol officers on cars, hoods, and trunks in this area and had them direct their rifle barrels towards the target location. I was trying my best to stay behind cover, but as they came in hot or running on foot at 10:30, everybody's pretty hyped up. I want them to know what's in play here. I didn't want them pointing weapons at apartments that were not in play, meaning, upstairs apartment or this or that apartment. I wanted them to know exactly what was in play as it was.
And did you see a man come out of this door here and start to walk out and toward the open door of apartment 4, who we now know was Cody Etherton?
I did not, ma'am.
Did not see.
I was over here in this parking lot.
So during the entire time, after you shot into this sliding door, after you shot into the window, and then were out there calling for patrol and were directing patrol where to point their guns, you didn't see Cody Etherton come out of apartment 3, this door here.
No, ma'am, but a patrol officer over here behind cover could have seen. I was straight more in front of the bedroom 2 in this area where I'd reloaded.
So during the time that you were in the vestibule, let's go back to the approach to the beginning. There is some ambient light in this vestibule, wasn't there? Wasn't completely dark, was it?
Ma'am, it was not pitch black, but I believe, to the best of my knowledge, there was some type of parking lot illumination back behind us, and I believe that may have fed a little bit of light into that dark. Well, you can see it's dark during daylight in this picture, but it's even darker at night, even with the parking lot lights on. As you can see, there's no lighting as it is inside this vestibule.
It's a very small vestibule.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Not really enough room for 6 men to stand in there, minus Campbell, is there?
I don't agree with that. We all fit in there.
And while you're in there in that very small vestibule, before entry was made, before any breach was made, did you not see this door here with a big 3 on it?
No, ma'am. As I said before, there were detectives standing in here. Lieutenant Hoover himself is 6'7", 250, 80 pounds. He's a large guy. Detective James is carrying a barricade shield, which takes up the space of an extra person. So that is at least 2 large figures between me and seeing any such doors here. Nor do I have any reason to be searching around for extra doors because my attention is focused on apartment 4 until Sarpay comes out of apartment 8 upstairs.
And when you walked up, before anybody ever even went in there, you didn't see right across from this patio here, you saw this one, didn't you?
I could see 2 balconies and 2 patios.
So you knew there was a door on this side, directly across from apartment 4.
I didn't see it, but I can only assume there would be.
Where were you standing when you were directing, you later found out was Kenneth Walker? Where were you standing when you were directing him out?
When we had sufficient cars, where I felt it was sufficient to do a call out, I obviously just explained I didn't want to do that by myself for obvious reasons, safety concerns, but when we had appropriate patrol there, in position, behind cover, with long rifles, that's when I felt it was safe to make a call out of the person inside. And I don't think I answered your question now that I went.
Put up exhibit.
I would have been straight out in the parking lot from that area.
So directing your attention to now what's up on the screen, Exhibit 1. Photograph that was taken that night. Where were you standing when you were directing Kenneth Walker to come out?
The best of my recollection, I was somewhere in here.
And how does he come out? Where does he walk?
He comes out at 4 and into this breezeway.
And did you have a light on him? You said you put the light on a vehicle there?
Yeah, the light that I left my Stinger, I believe on one of these cars here, the trunk of one of these cars here. Ma'am, I don't recall if I had my light on him when he exited the apartment or not. I don't recall that. I would refer that to
Wouldn't it,
body cam footage.
wouldn't it have been important for you to have a light on him, be able to see him as you were directing him out?
Yes, ma'am. It'd be important for him to be illuminated, and I'm not saying he wasn't, but it could have been by other officers.
And he came out of apartment 4, the door, and you were paying close attention to him as he exited that door, weren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
So at that time, as he exited the door to apartment 4, did you not see this door directly within a couple feet to the left of apartment 4 with a big 3 on it?
No, ma'am. My attention was directed towards Mr. Walker himself.
Okay. Louisville Metro Police does not teach suppressive fire, does it?
Not to my knowledge, ma'am.
That's all the questions I have.
Any questions on redirect?
I have a couple redirects. Brett, Ms. Whaley asked you about the breezeway after the shooting. She said you left your fellow officers in the breezeway and you left. Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury why you left that breezeway?
I removed myself as quickly as possible so I could move to a location where I could actively or accurately return fire and stop that threat. It's my fellow detectives that were being shot at in the hallway.
And then you said that you fired 5 shots through the sliding glass door, 5 shots through the bedroom window. And you said you intended to fire 5 shots. Did you know you were firing 5 shots?
I did not count that, no, sir.
Okay, when you say you intended to fire 5 shots, is that because you later learned that's what you fired and you intended to fire every shot that you did fire?
That's accurate.
You weren't counting?
No, sir.
Correct. Thank you. I have nothing further.
Anything else?
No, nothing wrong.
You can step down.
Thank you, Judge.
Your next witness?
Sorry?
Your next witness?
Oh, we rest.
All right, thank you. All right, counsel, would you approach the bench, please? All right, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard all the evidence that you are going to hear in this case, and so we are going to recess for the day. The attorneys and I will stay here. We'll work on the instructions that will be given to you tomorrow morning prior to the closing arguments that will be made, and you will deliberate the case tomorrow. As I mentioned yesterday, you might want to make any arrangements that you need to make just in case you're here longer than what you're normally here during our trial. Please remember the separation admonition and don't do any independent investigation nor discuss the case with anyone. Please avoid all media accounts of the trial. I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9:30.